a window and door sale as a builder, if you've ever had one go wrong because you had a not so good salesperson, you'll never go back. I mean, once you've had a bad experience, I can think of at least one or two window and door suppliers in Austin that got a bad reputation and went out of business simply because they were not great at ordering and understanding the process. And so you don't have many chances with builders. Once you make us look bad once or make us lose money on a project because of something that happened, we're done. We're never going to give you a second chance.
Thank you, Matt, for coming on the Think Like an Owner podcast. This show's all about how the most ambitious CEOs are growing companies. And you've grown at least two companies by my count through Rising Our Builds and now Build Show. And I'm excited for your Build Show Live conference this Friday and Thursday in Dallas. So that'll be a ton of fun. I'm excited for that. The first one was great.
This is only our second one. It's hard to believe. Time flies.
The first one was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. It's pretty packed too. You could tell the demand for in-person content, connection, and stuff like that is pretty strong.
Yeah, for sure. We had great straight out of the gates, we had 2,000 people at our first brand new conference. So that was amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'm excited to chat with you all about suppliers and how home builders are purchasing products today and for their work. But I want to make sure we start with some of the background in Risinger Builds and then Build Show and how the two businesses kind of overlap, because I think that influences a lot of your thinking around how you look at the supplier side of the industry. So can you start kind of walking through how you became a home builder with Risinger and then where Build Show came from?
Yeah, I'll give you the quick story so we don't bore people, but I've been building houses for 30 years now. I started right after college with a big national builder and built with a national builder for 7 years and then worked for a semi-custom builder for 3 years before starting my own company 20 years ago now. I'm a custom builder in Austin, Texas. So we do typically relatively expensive projects. You know, our usual sweet spot is something like $2 to $5 million projects, mostly new construction, but we do some remodel as well. And we've done a few more expensive than that and a few less, but that's kind of our general sweet spot. And when I started my company in 2005, I was new to Austin. This was my wife's hometown. I had built in the East Coast and then I built in the West Coast. And we moved here when we were pregnant with our first kiddo, my wife's hometown. And that was kind of my chance to finally flex my entrepreneurial muscles that I'd always wanted to do. So I started this home building company and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know that much about running a business, even though I had 10 years of construction background. I didn't know that much about business in general. So I started this home building company, and one of my early challenges was like, how do I market myself? I'm brand new to Austin. No one knows me. I don't know suppliers. I don't know people. So I joined the local home builders association, and relevant to this conversation, I also joined a purchasing group that was a branch of this larger national purchasing group called CBUSA, Custom Builders USA. And so I had this kind of friends that I was builder friends, let's call them, at the HBA, Home Builder Association I was meeting. And then a branch of them asked me to be the chairman of their brand new chapter here because I knew I had more time in my hands than they did. And so myself and 7 guys started a purchasing group, or I should say a branch of a larger national purchasing group. And as part of the Home Builder Association, one of the events that I went to was this national speaker in marketing, this guy, David Meerman Scott. And David said to Matt Reisinger in 2006, traditional marketing is dead. You should market yourself at the time, he said, with a blog, because blogs are the wave of the future. You know, this search engine called Google will send people your blog and you will find leads basically for free. And so I started blogging in 2006 and 7 and found very quickly that even though I was getting, 15 people to read my blog post that I'd had up for a month, one of those people was a prospect. And so people that I was interested in building houses for, they would Google me basically. They'd find my blog, they'd read a bunch of my blog posts, and I would go into meetings instead of being cold, like, who's this shady builder? Let me find out about him. Someone referred him, but he has not built anything here. That to all of a sudden I was a little bit of an expert. Like, oh, this guy, he's smart. He writes blog posts about construction. So then fast forward about a year later, and a friend of mine said, oh, you should try my flip video camera and post some videos to YouTube. And I thought, oh, this is great. I won't have to write my blog anymore. I'll just make a short video on YouTube and I'll post that on my blog. And so I put my first video up in 2008 on YouTube. This, at that point, it was still relatively new. It wasn't owned by Google yet, and it kind of turned into its own thing. It wasn't overnight. It took years for me to get there. But now I went into meetings and I would have a video that had, let's say, 50 views. And I'd be like, "Oh, honey, you won't believe it. My video that I published, a month ago has 50 views. 50 people watched it." And I'd go into a meeting with a prospect that maybe got a referral, or maybe an architect told them I was a good builder. And now, instead of, kind of a wet fish handshake, "Oh, you're the guy who writes the blog," they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Matt, I watched a couple of your videos last night. I really liked how you could tell me the difference between double glaze and triple glaze windows and why I might want to spend more for the better window. Or you helped me understand the difference between fiberglass windows and wood windows." And it was just enough encouragement for me to go, oh, this video thing, this is a big deal. Like, people connect with people on video much quicker than they do writing. I mean, you may have a favorite sports writer, or, maybe you like Barry Weiss, the former New York Times Free Press writer, but I don't even know what she looks like, frankly. If I saw her in a meeting, I wouldn't have any clue, even though I like her writing, right? But video, on the other hand, video is super connective, and instantly someone that you've watched videos for. Just like the first time I met you, Alex, a year or two ago, you kind of knew what to expect of my personality before we met. And so it was really that early kind of success that I was like, oh, I should keep doing this. This is free marketing that's providing a really good, not necessarily leads. They weren't necessarily leads to my company, but they were like proof points that I was someone that they might want to work with. So it was really connective. Fast forward a few years, and my current CEO, this guy Don Leesom, came to me. His brother had been working for me for a while, and said, "Hey Matt, this is like 20, I don't know, 16 or 2017. I think we could turn your YouTube channel, which at that point had maybe, I don't know, 25,000 subscribers or something. I think we could turn this into a bigger company or bigger organization." And he's the one who dreamed up this whole idea of Build Show Network. And so we got the .com, buildshownetwork.com, and then we invited other like-minded builders and an architect. And now we've got about 15 people on the site that are publishing content on a weekly basis. And in recent history, in the last 2 weeks even, we've added some other YouTube channels to publish to our site as well. So now we're almost 20 new videos a week on our platform, and it's all geared towards building better houses. Like, we have this slogan around here: "Know better, build better." So it's really fun. That's the slightly medium version of my history.
Yeah, and now you're up to 1.2 million YouTube subscribers. So, it's been a while since you just had 25,000.
Yeah, we've gotten bigger, but an even better stat for me that I really enjoy is we get more watch time on our website overall every month than we do on our YouTube channel. And that's really cool. We've gotten great domain authority. Every single video we publish a transcript so that Google can crawl the transcript and know, hey, we're talking about insulation, or we're talking about this nerdy detail in construction, or this hardware, or this whatever. And so people that are putting those search terms in some way, shape, or form, we're getting ranked right up there with YouTube for domain authority. So we get really high top 10 results on just about anything we publish, which is really fun.
Yeah, that is pretty fun. And you and I have talked a lot about all the things you can do with being able to search across your site and connect with products, connects products to YouTube, or products to the content about that product. There's going to be a lot of fun things, especially with AI search generators that you can use. There's a lot of things you can do now.
We have some cool things in the works that aren't quite there yet, but we're working on behind the scenes, Alex. And actually, to tie a bow on this real quick, to say I'm in a weird spot where I've got a home building company and I'm a 50-50 owner. I really only spend probably 10 or 15% of my work hours on the home building company every week. But then I've got this other company, which is a video production company. They're about the same size, they're about the same revenue currently, but one company uses suppliers to build houses, and the other company has typically not necessarily the local supplier, but more like the national manufacturers as our customers. So it's been kind of fun to see things from both sides. We for instance, I've bought Pella windows through Builders First Source, my supply house, as a builder, but now I have Pella windows as one of my big customers for my video production company. So I'm seeing kind of all sides of that particular supplier slash manufacturer's world, which is fun.
Yeah, no kidding. You've had a lot of different experiences with suppliers on all kinds of different angles in that relationship. What was buying building supplies like when you first started rising, or when you're small? You mentioned there's not much reputation. You're the new guy in Texas. What is that like compared to, jumping ahead once you've got some content, you have an audience, and there's a little bit of cachet with your name?
Yeah, I mean it's a whole different world 20 years ago than it is today, Alex, on many fronts. But that's also a big reason why we decided to start that purchasing group, because I was regularly meeting with other builders that were just doing a couple $1 million of business a year, and we were finding that we kind of had the sense that we weren't getting the best pricing or the best service. The bigger guys were getting that reserved for them, whether it was a plumbing supply house or a lumber yard or whatever. And so I guess it was 2007, 2008, started this purchasing group and realized, oh, we actually, if we say together as a group, hey, we're looking for really good service first, but then beyond that, we want to be treated as a group with good pricing, so that I'm not just buying, $3 or $4 million worth of supplies a year. But if we get together with 10 of us or 15 of us, we're really building, $50 million worth of houses a year. Well, that got some people to say, oh, I might be interested in working with you guys on some better pricing, knowing that you would favor my company over others, assuming I get the same good service to you. So that's a lot of that has changed over the 20 years I've been in business.
What did good service look like? What was the current experience you were having? And then what's the better service, the model you were aspiring to be a part of? What did that look like?
Yeah, a lot of companies have what I would call outside sales reps, or a lot of times they'll call them OSRs. And then they'll sometimes have some inside sales reps as well. And the quality of that relationship and that particular person means the world to a builder who's not a national builder. And I would say that's still just as true today as it was 20 years ago. As a quick for example, I had this guy Richard at Builders First Source. They used to be called BMC back then. They got bought. But Richard was my outside sales rep, and I don't remember who my inside guy was necessarily, but I didn't necessarily get great pricing at the time because I think I was in a low volume category, so I probably had a higher margin on things. They were making more money off me than they were another builder, but I was really loyal to them because I always got great service from Richard and felt like, hey, if I needed something, he would turn it around quickly for me. Like, hey, I've got this window package coming up. I'm bidding on this house. Let's say, can you bid this for me as a Marvin Essential package and also give me a quote on, let's say, moving to a JELD-1 200 series? And he'd be like, yeah, well, I think we can turn that around in a week. I can get that back for you Monday. And I always got great service. He always kind of made good on his promises. And so I stuck with him, even though I kind of had this sense that I wasn't necessarily getting most favored nation pricing, for lack of a better term, because the service was so good. And I would say that the same is very true today, whether it's a purchasing group, whether it's, big builders, small builders. this is still definitely somewhat of a relationship business. And there's other things that have come into play now in terms of ordering and pricing and takeoffs and being able to get pricing online, all those kinds of things. We'll talk. I bet we'll get into that, but it's still ultimately a personal business, and people want to do business with people they like. They want to do people business with people that they feel like care about them and their business and their success. So, good old fashioned customer service is not out the window in an age that you can order anything you want from Amazon in 2 minutes on your phone.
No, no, that's not going anywhere. If anything, with AI making more things appear maybe human, maybe fake, maybe written by a computer, I bet that human to human connection is probably going to make a, if it hasn't already made a big comeback, it's probably going to be pretty strong for a long time.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Going back to like the co-op or the buying group, what was it like running that? How is that still around, or did that get combined into something different?
Yeah, no, that's still around. They actually got bought out by a bigger organization, and I'm not in leadership anymore. It's been quite a few years since I've been in leadership with them, but they're going strong. They're doing really well on a national basis. They've moved from kind of making local deals to now they have a bunch of national partnerships. Like if you want to buy Renai water heaters, you can get a rebate on Renai and kind of buy it from wherever you want, but you can apply for this pretty decent rebate back from them. But it was interesting when we started that group, Alex, that there was a little bit of a rub between not all the builders necessarily cared about getting the best pricing if that meant that they were going to have to go to a supplier that didn't have good service. So there was some rub between the group. We had I don't know, a dozen or so when we started, and maybe 20 or 25 when I left the board a few years ago. And there was a little bit of a like, oh, are we going to really use that supply house who doesn't have the best relationship just because they give us the best price? And a lot of us, like me, were like, no, I'm not going to use them just because they're the best price. Price is only one consideration for me as a builder. And people think, oh, it's all about price for builders. I don't think that's necessarily true. I'd be willing to venture that that's not even true for the big national production builders. Uh, with the caveat being sometimes those decisions are made without the input of the field. That was actually something that frustrated me as a field superintendent for a big national builder was that corporate made decisions that I thought were made by an accountant, not by a builder, without my input or without field input. So we did some things that I didn't like as a national builder. And that was frankly part of the impetus for me starting my own company.
Did you notice that there was any correlation between the size of the supply house and quality customer service?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I would say that's probably still true to this day that typically the smaller suppliers gave better customer service and the big national suppliers didn't always. As a quick for instance, there's a specialty lumber yard in town here in Austin called Eastside Lumber and Decking. And when I started in Austin, they were called Texas Redwood. I don't know if they changed ownership or not, but Eastside Lumber and Decking has a giant amount of custom builders that do mostly cost plus work and could kind of, it's not that they could care less on pricing, they certainly do, but they're passing the pricing on to clients. And so the difference between a $10,000 package of, whatever, let's say exterior trim and a $13,000 package doesn't even make the radar screen. What they care about is, can I get it there on Tuesday at 9 a.m. before my carpenters start? And oh, by the way, if I need a hot shot, which is a industry term for, hey, we need something quickly, like, can you get it out to me? They were always the guys who are like, oh yeah, no problem. We got you, Matt. We'll have a guy there by 1 o'clock. By the time the guys finish lunch, we'll have that needed whatever that you forgot to order out to the job site. So there is still very much a place for a specialty small supplier to compete with a big national supplier. 100%.
So if the human to human customer service relationship that's been that's still a hugely important and crucial piece of any builder supplier relationship. What notable things have changed in the last 10 years? What's different if I'm following you around for a week at Rising or Build, today versus 10 years ago as you talk to suppliers? What would I notice that's different?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is if you look at just 10 years ago, it was just 10 years ago that we had customers, especially on the custom builder side, that couldn't necessarily price out much on their house, but they could price out, for instance, plumbing to buy it online. And so when I presented bid packages to customers, they had no idea what paint costs were or labor for this or that, but they could absolutely take Kohler part number XYZ and go find a price online and go, oh my gosh, Matt, you're way overpaying for this Kohler toilet or whatever it is. I could find this piece online that has the same part number at 20% less. Or even worse, I can find this other brand that looks just like it for 60% less. And we had a solid, I don't know, at least 5 years where it was a fight with every client to say, no, we don't want to order your plumbing package from this online retailer. We want to order it from our local supply house because they'll give us good service. And if we have a problem, we can get a part, we can get whatever. I think it's interesting. I wonder if we're coming full circle on that. Like if you look at Amazon today, you can get 10,000 faucets in stock for overnight delivery. And Kohler all the way down to the knockoff, made in China version that looks just like the Kohler, but is 70% off or, whatever. So I have a sense that may come around again. And another quick, for instance, 10-ish years ago, the big box stores, I don't want to name their names, were going after builder business. They had like pro desks, and all the pros are like, are you kidding me? Not only no, but heck no, I'm not using those guys. And you'd have a client who'd be like, oh, I priced it out at the pro desk, and they're going to give whatever these parts and pieces are, sometimes even lumber, at a much better price. And we're like, no, absolutely, we're not doing them. Well, if you look today, the big orange guy has not only a pro desk, but they have an outside sales rep who's been hounding my people about giving us a chance and apparently has an entire yard just in Austin that's a pro yard that's stocking all the same stuff that the big boys that are dedicated just to builders are stocking. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. But another interesting thing that's happened, I would say, in the last 10 years that's changed a lot on the supply is 10, maybe 15 years ago, when I had a set of plans, I would take it to my suppliers and say, hey, can you give me a takeoff on this? For instance, lumber, which is a huge part of construction. I always said lumber was about 7% of the cost of the build. So if you think about a lumber pack, that's a giant amount of money. So I was taking it to the lumber yard and saying, hey, give me a takeoff and then give me a price. Today, companies like Cedar.build, who you may or may not have heard of, they're a local startup in Austin. Hierarch, do you know those guys? They're crushing it. And then even like Builders First Source has gone big time into this. They call their suite of software digital tools. All three of those companies are giving a full amount of information to me as a builder that I don't have to request a takeoff anymore. I know exactly what's going into the house. Every Simpson strong tie, joist hanger, every hold down, every 2x4, every eye joist. I know all the kit of parts. And I could, in theory, take that somewhere else. Or now that I know this kit of parts, I can get a full breakdown price from Builders First Source, let's say, on either that lumber package that my guys are going to assemble in the field or on a ready frame package, which is basically a pre-cut framing package. So it's companies like those three that I think are really changing the landscape on certainly production builders, and that's trickling down in a good way to custom builders as well.
So you're saying there's a way you could take your documents, put them into one of these software platforms. I met Mark last week at Hierarch. He was
Oh, you
awesome.
did? Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
he's great. So you could take your plans, put them into this software platform, which would look at your plan and then figure out exactly how many of each type of product and part that you need, and then you can essentially give that, I guess, is it a spreadsheet? Like, what do you give that you can send to the supply house and then they can itemize you a big giant quote?
It's essentially a spreadsheet. It's essentially a spreadsheet. As a side note, I think that's something that we're used to as builders. A lot of builders have their own proprietary spreadsheet that they've developed over the last 15 years. That's kind of their quick estimate spreadsheet that they'll use. Like, hey, I'm going to give you not just a high level, oh, it's $600 a foot to build this house, but they'll input the square footages and the quantities. And then they've got a giant proprietary spreadsheet, which is nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet that's been updated with pricing over the years, that they can spit out a pretty good ballpark. When I first moved to Austin, there was this guy, Russell Eppright. I don't know if he's around anymore, but he had one of these like giant spreadsheets that I was fascinated with when I moved here, because he could have someone come into his, he was like a semi-custom builder. He could have someone come into his model home and he had 20 plans that were his basic plans, and he'd modify them however you want, but he could spit out a really close price for you to sign a contract, and then for him to know that he was going to make his margin on that build starting at, let's say 90 days from now, 60 days from now. And I think that actually is back to the future with today. I think companies like Hiarc are going to allow production builders, the current versions of Russell Eppright that are maybe doing 30 to 50 homes a year, semi-custom builders, for someone to come into a model home, take something that's been relatively pre-designed, modify it, spit out a contract price, and them to know down to the penny how much it costs, because all their suppliers are linked in digitally to that BIM model, basically building information model, to say, here's exactly what my supply house is charging me for everything. And by the way, I can give you a photorealistic rendering of exactly what you want, Mr. Customer, so that you know precisely what you're getting. And the same's true with BFS, their digital tools. And if you look at the renderings that we did for a project recently called the Reisinger build, we did a full video series on the renderings that were done 12 months prior to completion, looked stunningly just like the finished product. It was crazy. So, I mean, just like Chevy can build and price your heavy duty, truck that's getting the, I'm trying to think of the high end models, let's call it the XLT or the Lariat model. Now you can do that exact same thing with a house. How crazy is that? And customize it too, potentially.
How do you think that affects, a couple more years down the road? How do you think that affects the builder supplier relationship? Does it make it more commoditized because now I can compare quotes very directly across? Or does that customer service still hold strong, and like you might see different prices, but it just gives you more pricing transparency, but the service isn't going to be really affected by any of that? So maybe the effect is transparency, but not transformative.
I think it's right. I think it's the latter. I think there's going to be better transparency. And in fact, I think it's actually going to make tighter relationships in a lot of ways, because you're going to have preferred partners that you like working with. And you're going to say, hey, link my back end with this, and this supply house so that I get their pricing, because I like that company. I like their service. I like what I get. And it depends too on the product, how much high touch is needed. I mean, for instance, a window and door sale, as a builder, if you've ever had one go wrong because you had a not so good salesperson, you'll never go back. I mean, once you've had a bad experience, I can think of at least one or two window and door suppliers in Austin that got a bad reputation and went out of business simply because they were not great at ordering and understanding the process. And so you don't have many chances with builders. Once you make us look bad once, or make us lose money on a project because of something that happened, we're done. We're never going to give you a second chance.
Explain it to a building supply rookie. So, what goes wrong in windows and doors that is exceptionally challenging?
Yeah, I mean, windows and doors are such a technical sale. If you look at a window on a plan set, it looks like a 2 foot wide by 4 foot tall window that's maybe a double hung. But if you order that as a Pella, if you order that as a Marvin, as an Anderson, I mean, I don't even have enough fingers and toes to tell you how many options there are on what could fill that hole. And the price ranges on those options are ridiculous. I mean, you could buy a window for $350 and you could buy a window for $3,500 that fits that same hole. And not only that, you have so many options in between there that making sure expectations line up with reality is super critical. I mean, if you've got, especially if you have a custom home where you have a buyer involved, right? Where it's not just show up and I'm buying a finished spec house, let's say. It's somebody who's saying, hey, I'm expecting jam extensions, pre painted. I want the steady set where I install it from the inside. I want this brick molding style on the outside. I want these integrated screens. There's just so many options, and there's so many possibilities for failure, especially on a window because it's these days there are no stock windows. Everything's 100% custom ordered, which means I can get a rough opening size to an eighth of an inch for whatever I want. So now that information from the window order to the field has to be super detailed and super critical. Because if I'm off in some way, shape, or form, the window's not going to fit. I'm paying my framer to resize the opening. There's a work stoppage. There's a slowdown. There's extra charges. There's a window that didn't meet a buyer expectation. There's a finish carpenter that's got to do a jam extension later that I didn't order correctly the first time. There's a remodel on a new construction window. There's just so many things that can go wrong that you've got to have a really good, not just customer service person, but a really kind of nerdy sales rep who understands all those details, understands code too, because they also need to make sure that windows meet the correct egress issues that they may be wrong in the plans from the architect. And then window supplier is the one who has to make sure that I know, hey, this window you're trying to order for this bedroom doesn't meet code. We got to change something here. Or this window in this hallway needs to be tempered. It's not shown as tempered on the plans, but your inspector is going to flag it. And if you put a non-tempered window in and now I got to order a tempered window, it might mean that I'm not closing on the house for 3 weeks because we have the wrong window in place and I'm not going to pass my final inspection. So there's just, it's fraught with all these minor details that could be a big problem, and they've got to have a really really detailed order. It's one of the most expensive pieces in the house. It's also one of the most detailed pieces in the house. But at the same time, I've got two suppliers right now that are fabulous at that I like either one. But at the same time, those two suppliers only have a limited catalog of things that they're really good at. So if someone comes to me and goes, I want you to order this XYZ brand of window, if I'm not going to get that brand from one of these two suppliers, I'm really hesitant to install that brand because I don't know it. And I might not get it right. Make sense?
Yeah, and your supplier through all of that has to be incredibly organized as they get first off the list of products that you want in that home, and then all the changes, and then all the ways that those changes might be communicated. Maybe you see them in person, or there's physical notes you're taking, whether it's a phone call or a string of emails, maybe a text. Like there's 100 ways that changes are going to be like inputted to that supplier that they have to keep track of, and when things are getting delivered. And that seems like an enormous challenge. So, like as you talk to more, especially larger national suppliers through Build Show, what did the challenges sound like from that side of the table? What do they talk about as their top challenges, and kind of how they're trying to stay organized and focus on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those good detailed outside sales reps are hard to come by, right? That's a tough one. We need just like we need young people to come into the trades. We need new young plumbers and electricians. We frankly also need young people to enter the lumber yard to be able to come to that position and understand what builders are talking about when they order those things. So I think labor is a big issue in supply houses, just like it is for builders as well. And some of these tools we're talking about are going to help with that in some respects. I'm pretty bullish about where I'm seeing companies like Hierarch and Cedar take us because they're so organized. They're helping builders who have traditionally been 2 decades behind on technology get up to speed on it. And so now if I can give my people in the field really good and detailed information, and maybe even, and I don't know if this is true, but I suspect it is, maybe even Hierarch has in their plans the full Pella catalog so that they can actually get that order, that takeoff super dialed, such that now all I got to do is take that to my sales rep and go, hey, here's the full Pella takeoff, including all the orders. And Hierarch is actually connected to Pella's back office, so they know all the latest and greatest with their catalog. All you need to do is give us lead time and pricing on that. And then, of course, provide good field service and delivery and all those other things. Maybe that's going to be able to reduce that additional step that's happened so much in the past that's been a tripping point.
So you're saying that when there's a change to the build, it can happen in hierarch with your takeoff, and then your supplier is already notified of the change and can start planning for it?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. That's pretty cool. I think that's probably already happening. That's not happening on my builds yet, but I suspect that's happening already in some of the more organized production builders.
So how do builders build that relationship with the supplier? Like what helps that relationship be more fruitful for them over time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a big thing that's helping is communication. If you look at some of our main suppliers in my home building company, I see their outside sales reps and sometimes even their upper level management at our office on a somewhat regular basis, meeting with our team, like saying, hey, here's some of the new stuff that's coming down the road. It's one of the things we love. Hey, here's some of the new stuff that's coming out that's going to be available for you in 2026. We can order this as of January. So if you have projects in the pipeline that you think would be a fit for this, whatever, this new product, this change in product, this new feature, keep these in mind for those projects. I love it when we have that good communication. I think it's a two-way street though. Builders also need to be able to communicate on a regular basis. Hey guys, here's what's going wrong, or some things that we need to be better at, but also here's some things that I really think are going well in our relationship. What am I missing as a builder? How can we be a better customer of yours so that we can make sure you're profitable, and maybe you can even reduce my pricing by a point or two because I'm a good partner with you, right? It's kind of the golden rule. If I'm being a good customer, then you're going to be a good supplier and vice versa.
As a content guy, where do you see a content affecting behavior on both sides here? Now that you've got, you know, many years of YouTube and experience working with different products and showcasing them and getting feedback on them, how is all of that changing the builder supplier relationship?
Yeah, it's changed a ton, Alex, and I think content's a big part of that. But our kind of slogan around here is "Know better, build better," and I think that's really happened when it comes to supplies. We're putting out the information uh, pro to pro, but what ends up happening a lot is we've got both customers and suppliers watching as well and learning that information and taking it into the field through all their channels. So, for instance, sales reps going, hey, I saw this on the build show. This is a new product. You guys should think about this. They're forwarding a video, they're sending a newsletter, they're forwarding a social media clip. We've got customers that are sending it to builders. Hey, I'm seeing this, this, and this. Are these options for my house? What's my air tightness going to be? Are we considering triple glazed windows for this house? What's our exterior insulation strategy? I'm in climate zone 5 and it's required in the 2024 code that I suspect we're going to have to build under. What are we going to do? Are we going to use Zip R6, or we're going to use some exterior rock wool? Are we going to buy power wool from Warehouse and use this on the outside? How's that going to affect our window package? Are we going to buck our windows out? And builders are like, what? I never had a client ask me this 10 years ago. And now all of a sudden I've got clients that are bringing material lists in with them and saying, I want to consider these windows. I want to consider this HVAC technology. I want to make sure I've got an ERV in my house, not just a old school fresh air system. It's crazy because we make our videos expecting it to be another builder watching, but yet there aren't a million two builders in the United States. And that's our subscriber count on the Build Show on YouTube. So that means we've got at least a couple 100,000, if not three-quarter million subscribers that are homeowners, that are engineers, that are architects, that are people that want to build a really good house and want to know and understand the process better before they enter it. And so those are the people that are ultimately changing the market. And that gets me excited because another big piece we've got coming down the pipeline, Alex, is this new, I think I may have told you about this briefly, but we've got this new standard for construction coming out called the Build HD standard. And, we've been making videos now for just shy of 20 years on how to build a good house, but we've never codified, like, here's all the things that we feel like need to be done differently or better than code to lead to a house that's going to be a really durable, a really lasting, a really comfortable, efficient house. Frankly, that's going to have really good resale. That's going to have really good health for your children to be raised in that house. For you to be able to sell that in 20 years and someone go, oh man, I would pay more for this because it was built to these standards than this other house that was built last year to a lower standard. So we're calling it the Build HD standard. It really won't be available to the public per se until sometime in Q1 of 2026, but we're giving a sneak peek to the builders at Build Show Live this coming week, and you'll see us talking about it on social. But we've got some really high level conversations happening with several of those companies I mentioned, as well as the International Code Council and ANSI as well, about trying to actually get this adopted potentially into the code as an alternate path.
I love that. Yeah, I was telling you on the phone how excited I am for this standard for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's kind of like a ratings agency for homes. So there's a rating you can give a home based on build quality that allows you to compare apples to apples across different homes that, as a home buyer, I may not be familiar with all the nuances of products. And then, as I, you know, become more successful over time and want to build a nicer home, and I've lived in a number of homes that were, old or had bad windows or bad HVAC, like I'm starting to, if I'm going to build one from scratch, like I want to make sure that I address all those things. So is there a standard that's above code that's going to focus on quality and, air and water and all this other stuff to make sure that it's as good as it can be? And is there a standard that I can adhere to, or at least point to and say, hey, Mr. Builder, can you build this to this standard that Matt's talking about over here? There's
Yeah,
there's a
that's
hundred
that's
ways
our
you can use
idea.
that.
And we're trying to make it, we will be made fully public that you can decide to follow or not, but at least it'll be good guidance for you. So that's our plan, is to really make this as adopted as possible. But frankly, as of all our information on our website's 100% free. We do everything that's manufacturer sponsored rather than paywall. So we really are trying to get as much of our information on building better to the general public as possible. And so I'm excited about this for that same reason, that I think we're going to reach a whole nother new audience that maybe has this general understanding that houses have changed and they don't quite know why, and they want to build to a higher standard.
Yeah, they see all the home building lawsuits, and they're like, well, how do I avoid that? I don't want to buy a home that falls apart or melts in the sun within a week of buying it. There's there's a lot around there that you can probably help with.
No
Um,
doubt. That's the idea.
and it's a good continuation of the content focus too, like your content focus of know better, build better, but the content focusing on education over time, and now to it's still very much an education focus, but it's more like implementation, like in practice. So out in the wild, can I benefit from Matt's knowledge of home building in my own life in a way that doesn't require me to watch, like, I could probably spend the rest of my life watching all of the build show YouTube videos and eventually become smart enough to do it, or to at least like understand like what's going on. But is there a faster way where, if I want to build a home in a month, or a couple months or a year from now, like I probably don't have time to do all that. I've got work and kids. So how do I take advantage of all the knowledge you have about building high quality homes and be able to implement that in my own life without spending the time on content specifically.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's what we're trying to do. Distill it down to as basic as we can, which at this point is 10 pages, single spaced of spreadsheet data. It's pretty extensive. I'm not sure it's going to grow any smaller either. It may only get bigger, but still to have 10 pages of good data on here's where you should start. I think it's going to be helpful.
You can even interact with a platform like Hierarch and have selectors for, hey, I want to build at the build HD Platinum standard, and check that box, and it adjusts all your products in your home build up to that standard. There's all kinds of different ways that you can take this, the 10 pages of spreadsheet, and actually implement it into something that's malleable and modular.
Yes, 100%.
It's going to be pretty
Yeah.
exciting. Matt, thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm super excited to see you in Dallas this week as well.
For
It'll be a
sure,
ton of
Alex.
fun.
Looking forward to seeing you, man. We're gonna have, I think, 160 manufacturers there, so it's gonna be some great conversations. And I think we're on track to break our people count last year. As of this morning, I saw 1,750 registered, but last year we had about 400 or 500 that registered at the door. So if that's the case, we'll end up being 10 or 15% more than last year. So that's great. That's good. That's good growth numbers. We're excited about it.
Yeah, that's a good year. Do you think Dallas has been a better market for it versus Austin, or do you think it's not affecting numbers necessarily?
I think it's actually affected him further down, unfortunately. I really wish it was in Austin again this year. Austin's such a cool destination with amazing barbecue and other restaurants and sights to see. And of course, we have a great home building community here that I think is very high performance focused. Dallas, I would say, as a general rule, is about 10 years behind Austin when it comes to good building practices. Not that they're a bad place to build a house, but there just seems to be less interest in building science there than there is in Austin. So we've got good and bad news there. It means that there's a lot of builders that need education. And so that's a good thing. I hope that we'll get some builders that maybe aren't in our ecosystem out there currently to attend the show and maybe start to know better, so they will build better. But at the same time, it's a heavy lift because we don't have as good of contacts there. As a side note, like our local HBA was all on board for us promoting locally, and we did a co-event. But the Dallas chapter, I don't want to disparage them, but they were like, no, we have our own show in July, and so we're not interested in helping you promote yours. We're like, really? Like we've been members for 20 years here. Like this is a great event for builders. Just because it's not your show doesn't mean it's not going to be beneficial. And they're like, no, sorry. So it's those kinds of things. You're like, dang it, come on, guys. I mean, we're all a rising tide floats all boats. We've always been inclusive. We've always seen really good partnerships with even competing companies out there. I mean, if you look at our friendship with Fine Home Building or Journal Light Construction, we have great contacts there. We promote each other, even though maybe we have some of the same advertisers, let's say. So I was a little disappointed in some of that old school mentality coming into Dallas. I'm hoping that won't dampen the numbers coming in. But I forget that not every town is as collegial as Austin is. I mean, I feel like Austin builders like each other. We've also had a lot of work here, and so we may be competitors, but we can still be friends. And I don't know if that's the case in every market.
Yeah, that may be a little bit different. The other thing too that the HD standard will play into is I can look at my local home builders. So here in Chapel Hill, if I want to build a home and obviously you're not going to fly your whole team out to Chapel Hill to build my house, but if I can find someone who follows your standard and can say we can build to the bronze, gold, platinum, whatever standard for build show for HD, that's a good indicator for me. That helps me out too.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Alex, really good spending time with you, man. I hope that we'll get to spend some time up in Dallas. Thanks for having me on your awesome podcast, Dave.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Think Like an Owner. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review and telling a friend to help more folks find Think Like an Owner. For full episode transcripts and our weekly newsletter, please visit our website at tlaopodcast.com.